As the push for change sweeps across America and other countries, we've seen corporates and agencies have been quick to signal their concern and support. And that's helpful, I think, because to stay silent as systemic racism meets its long overdue moment of reckoning is to stay complicit. And so our next session is going to really examine this worldwide movement to end ongoing systemic racism and social injustice. As I think we're all aware, the rate of progress has remained glacial. And that helps to explain why many from underrepresented backgrounds see these promises as corporate platitudes rather than concrete action. And so, to lead this session, I am going to introduce from Zeno Group, the CEO, who is Barbie Siegel. But I need to ask if Barbie is on the call yet. Yes, there she is. Fantastic. Looking as unruffled as ever. And so with that said, Barbie, I'm going to hand over to you. Welcome to the Provoke Global Summit. And please do take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure that my two guests are actually on the line, Tyrone and Sherry. Yes. Okay, fantastic. So thank you, Arun. It really is an honor to be here with my two esteemed panelists, both of whom work in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion globally, but in two different industries and in two different parts of the world. So first, I want to introduce Tyrone Studemeyer, Global Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Hyatt Hotels Corporation. He's based in Chicago. And Sherry Hughes, Diversity and Inclusion Director for Page Group in the UK. Welcome to you both. So we titled this session, Stop Checking the Box, Embedding Diversity for Long-Term Impact, because I really want to focus on the meaningful actions, not the words, but the actions that matter today inside global companies like yours, where DE&I is deeply embedded into the ethos of the company. And what is our role as communicators, internally and externally, to advance the work that you're doing? And as the title of our session suggests, ensure that it's not just a one-off check the box, but core to how the company operates and the decisions we all make. So let's get started. I want to talk first about what each of you are doing or observing that can give us hope that change this time is really possible. Tyrone, back in June, Hyatt launched its Change Starts Here. Tell me what that is and what worries you about making real progress today.
Thank you so much, and I'm honored to be here in this session. I think these type of dialogues helps us all to better understand as we share best practices and pitfalls and barriers. So when we started after the murder of George Floyd, and we in June, we started with Change Starts Here, and we want to start with ourselves first. We need to look internal to see where we can make a difference in society, looking at three components. One, who we hire, who we develop, and who we employ, looking at our data analysis by levels in the organization, gender around the world, and gender and ethnicity and race within the United States, and to make goals to advance talent. Second was our commitment to who we support. So we know that there's unemployed youth between the ages of 16 and 24 that we feel that we can hire. We have a program called Rise High, targeting those individuals because you don't need a high school diploma or a college degree to work in the hotel. And we have we have progress in the organization. People have gone from doorman to general manager, from housekeeper to general manager. It's great succession. So we feel we can have a major impact with that population of people around the globe. And then we wanted to look at also looking at entrepreneurs and suppliers. So we made a commitment that 10% of our spend will go to those suppliers and helping them in a couple of different ways where we're offering pro bono hours from our corporate office headquarters and our hotels to help the Black and brown community as we build to help them to rebuild. So we are currently working. I give it a good example. In Baltimore, there was a African-American female cupcake owner and made cupcakes, and she lost her lease during the pandemic. We invited her to come into our hotels to bake her cupcakes and also sell them out of the hotel. So doing some things that are non-conventional to help with those. We have 1,000 pro bono hours to get back within the next 5 years. And I'm happy to report that this year, now until the end of the year, we had 70 hours left. We're at over 300 hours where our colleagues have stepped up to the plate and provided services, whether expungements for records, people who have criminal records, things in their record that needs to be removed. We have had individuals to provide time to help restaurant owners to get their digital platform up and running. So helping where we have the skills and techniques and technologies to help that we do, we can help our entrepreneurs as well, business owners. And then on this slide piece, the 10,000 hours, the 1,000 hours back to the community is really something that has taken on with our leaders are engaged, they're involved. Our CEO is on our diversity council, chairs our diversity council, our co-chair. Each one of his direct reports are executive sponsors of our diversity business resource groups, and they're opposite of the groups for a specific reason. That we have 2 white men who are executive sponsors and co-sponsors of the Hyatt Black. So they're advocating for a group that they may not know very much about, but they're learning. And what we create is mutual adaptation. And I have to say, it gets kind of competitive in our environment. We have a Caucasian male who co-leads our women at Hyatt with an African-American female, our CHRO, and being able to honor those differences. And within his environment, at one time, more than 90% of his direct reports were women. Right. And so actually understanding how he motivated and how he developed and advanced those women will help him to use those same practices to advance women within our organization globally. So again, having people to create the environment where we have that aha moment, you give them feedback, they're able to self-correct. And the goal is to influence others and to influence systems. This is a systems issue that was created and developed. Corporate America 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago now, was created and developed for white men by white men. And then as we began to other demographics begin to come into the workforce, we have to look at those systems, those biases that are there and those pitfalls. And we're moving, I think, very aggressively towards equality versus equity. You know, equity says everybody's treated the same. Equality says giving people the tools they need to succeed, whether it's networks, whether it's people, with resources. We want to really make sure that we're eliminating those barriers and having the appropriate conversations. And I always comment, our CEO, a few years ago, we had a leadership meeting, said, God has given us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And it starts with listening. And the first step to change is actually questions. Questions will provoke change. If we're listening to what our colleagues are saying and what our guests are saying, and we take that serious and lead with an evidence-based diversity, equity, inclusion plan, we're more likely to outperform the competition. We're likely to attract and retain talent. And we're more likely to actually make the world a better place to work for everyone.
Tyrone, that is so impressive. And we could spend the entire session just unpacking so much of what you talked about. I think you hit on a couple of things that if we have time, we'll come back to. One that I'm really interested in and have been talking about actually lately with some clients is the credentializing, if you will, of the roles and how open we should be to bring on people that don't have a college degree. I think that's a really interesting and important area for discussion. And I also love the inclusion aspect of everything you talked about. It's one thing to bring people in, but we know it's a very different thing to have people stay and grow and become the person and professional they want to be. So I'm going to pause there and turn over to Sherry. Sherry, Page Group has been recognized as a leader in many matters and in many aspects of DE&I, race, gender, disability. How have you really embedded Page, DE&I, in Page in the UK and across so many of the markets where you operate, especially given global nuances around this topic?
Yeah, hi, Barbie. Well, it hasn't been easy, that's for starters. So we started about 9 years ago and we looked at our gender balance, which I think is where a lot of businesses start. And you know, before you can set up any sort of strategy, you've got to understand and you've got to listen to that group and know what the barriers are. I mean, a lot of the things Tyrone said, I resonate with completely. If you don't ask the questions, then you can't know what the problems are. And until you know what the problems are, you can't do anything about it. And there's nothing worse than all the wrong people making the decisions. So 9 years ago, we did that, and we understood what the barriers to progression were for our females. And we knew we could do something about it. So we did. And that's where it all starts. And you can't do that without top-down support. You've got to have buy-in from everybody in the organization, because it's not one person's responsibility. You know, this has to be a cultural shift, and your organization fundamentally has got to change. And if you think about the world of recruitment, you know, again, as Tyrone said, you know, if we didn't look at our own people first and our own culture, then how can we replicate that in our service delivery? How can we go into clients and help them recruit diversity if we haven't done it for ourselves in the first place? So it's come to life in so many ways. We have looked at our culture. We have changed it. I mean, we're a 40-odd-year-old business, and that's not been easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I would definitely say to anybody listening is, like, you've got to recognize this is a long-term change. This is not going to happen overnight, and you have got to be committed. The number of people who say, like, I want this all sorted by the end of the month, and you're like, if your business isn't prepared to honestly evolve, then you're not getting anywhere. So we're 9 years in, and by now we have a gender strategy, we have a disability strategy, we have an LGBTQ plus strategy, we have a parents and carers strategy, we have a race strategy, and, you know, they all have their own nuances. And then to your point about globally, I mean, we have to recognize that too. There are political, cultural and societal differences in many parts of the globe. So we don't necessarily do everything in exactly the same way in all the regions. You know, some strands will take priority for certain reasons. We will tweak it in this way to make it relevant, or we just try and take a step back and almost, for want of a better phrase, almost make it above the law a little bit. So if we did, so for example, our Pride campaign, the first global Pride campaign we did, we made it all around being an ally, because it meant nobody had to out themselves if they didn't want to. They certainly didn't have to do that in countries where that's very contentious and illegal in many countries, you know, but they could still feel part of something. And I think irrelevantly of how you identify, whether you're LGBTQ or whatever, you're still an ally to everyone else in that community. So it's not just about being a straight ally, it's about being an ally. And I think, you know, that has made a difference. We've really brought it to life in an effective way.
Sherry, you raised so many important points, this idea that this is long-term. And I think what we have been talking about, certainly as an industry and internally at Zeno, is what are the short-term moves we can make and what are the long-term moves we can make, but making sure that, as Tyrone said, it is systemic. I'm curious, as you and I talked about earlier this week, what was the impact of the tragic death of George Floyd in the UK, and how did that sort of translate over to impact the work that you were doing among your employees and even with your clients?
Gosh, I mean, it was as abhorrent over here as I suspect it was over there. I mean, I don't think anybody came out of that knowledge unscathed, irrelevant of race. Our Black community, of course, was struck the hardest, and rightly so. We've been looking at race inclusion since 2019. So we'd already set the foundations in regards to our strategy, and we were well on the way to implementing a lot of those things. So we'd already launched it and we were working on it. But you have to stop and think about, right, what do people need now? What do our Black community need right now? When this has happened, it's one of their own. It might be across the pond, but it's, you know, still one of their own. And we took some advice from our diversity partner, who is outstanding. She works with us on race and gender specifically, and she's just been remarkable. And so we did a number of what we called Be Heard sessions, so that we just give everyone a safe space just to share and, you know, help the rest of us, those of us who aren't Black, understand what it feels like to be Black at the moment. When something like that happens, what does that really mean? You know, they're still stopped unnecessarily over here in the UK. You know, lots of the patterns are very similar, and how parents are teaching their Black sons or biracial sons is that they will be stopped. It's not a if you're stopped, it's when you're stopped. And that is a very real part of UK life as well. And so, I mean, it has supercharged all of our activity around what we call unity at Page. It was well underway anyway, but it has really given it an extra bit of impetus. And I think race inclusion has shot up on many people's agendas as a result of it.
Sherry, you and I are both white. We did not grow up Black, and we can learn, but we're not in the mother's shoes who are worried about their sons. And after George Floyd, a colleague of mine at work who is Black, I got on a call like this and I said to him, "How are you doing?" And he said something to me that I carry with me all the time now. He said, "Don't ask me how I'm doing." He said, "I want to know how you're doing." He said, "I want to know what the white people are talking about around the dinner table tonight." And that has so stuck with me. And I appreciate that you're in this role and you are white, and what Tyrone said about having non-Black individuals really participate. It's sort of like working on gender diversity with women and not inviting the men into the room. If we don't invite the men into the room, they can't learn on how to be more open-minded. So staying for a moment on the George Floyd theme, one question that I do worry about, given the world in which we're living and so much going on and so many issues and the news cycle, how do we make sure, and Tyrone, I'll send it back to you for this, that business doesn't lose interest when the next big world event or tragedy comes along? Because this is not a new issue. It's been going on for hundreds of years, and it stops and it starts. How do we keep this front and center no matter what?
That's a very good question. I think it's having these types of dialogues. And I think it's being curious enough to explore the differences. I think it's important to have the courage to be able to have what we call courageous conversations and create. We at Hyatt, we're a purpose-driven organization. Our purpose is to care for people so they can be their best. So understanding what does it mean to be my best as a Black man, as a woman, and having those conversations up front. So being curious, having courage, and being courageous enough to really listen and do something about it. I think it was, if it had not been for the young digital native who stood on the corner with her iPhone, had enough courage and was courageous enough to film that so the world could see it, she is our Rosa Parks of this generation. And if we go back 60 years ago, it was about civil rights and human rights. Today, it's about equality, it's about equity. And it starts with corporate America. I applaud the young individuals who were on the streets protesting, not those that looted and not those destroyed, but who stood up for what they believed in around culture, around fairness, about giving an opportunity. I applaud them and support them. Now, I'm not supporting the vandalism and the looting. That's not what I'm saying. But they had enough insights, enough courage to go forward to keep this alive. We in corporate America have to continue to have the conversation. We have to set goals. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to report out. I think you have seen corporations give billions of dollars over the next 5 and 10 years for this issue. But the proof is in the pudding. For decades, we have been what I call admiring the issue, having the conversations with with great intentions, but no resolve. We have to hold ourselves accountable and making sure that we're putting targets and measures and goals, and we're measuring that and reporting out on that progress. And I am not a fan of, let's just take a risk with a woman or take a risk with someone of color. It's not about taking a risk. It's a good business sense. It's the right thing to do. It's what's available in the marketplace. We must get behind it. I struggle as a Black man. I call it fatigued and sometimes low depressed because of what's going on, because I have a target on my back. As growing up as a Black man in Detroit, Michigan, the messages that my parents gave me, you have to work twice as hard. You have to come early. You have to stay late. And they still will not take you, you're still gonna be taken for granted and not ever meet the expectations of many. I experienced that as a practitioner. Right, being in this space for 30 years, and then I'm questioned and doubted. Right, but do we do that with white men? I say all the time, and people get offended by it, and I don't want to offend anyone. I believe that women and people of color have to prove that they're competent, and I have seen that white men have to prove that they're not. Therein lies the difference. They make assumptions that a white man will always be successful. Women, people of color have a tendency to say, well, I'll go back to get another degree. I need more experience. I need more time. I'll wait till I'm promoted. We're waiting and waiting. And white men will take the opportunity in a heartbeat. Right.
And that's where involving the white individuals is so important, so we all can understand from that perspective. I just want to switch gears a little bit. We have about 10 minutes left. So we have an audience filled with communicators. You both are diversity, equity, and inclusion experts. And we all know that in this pandemic, last 8 months, really the role of communications has taken on so much more importance, both in terms of corporate reputation, but I would say even more important, the employee population. What can, I'll start with you, Sherry, what can we say to our audience of communicators in terms of their role in helping to champion the work that you and the diversity team are doing? It's not PR, that's for sure. So give us some thoughts on that, and then we'll send it back to Tyrone.
Without doubt, what's worked most effectively for us is bringing it to life. So since the beginning, so since 2012, beginning of 2012, it's been about our people and highlighting their story, so that it's not a theory. It's about these are our people. This is what it's like to be a Black woman at Page. This is what it's like to be a parent. This is what it's like to have a disability. And we've made it, front and center, so that people can't ignore it. And suddenly then people resonate, because they suddenly go, gosh, that's similar to my brother, or actually I've always felt like that, but I've never really felt like I could share. And this is where suddenly you get much more kind of solidarity, and you've touched on the allyship, yourself there, which is like, this is how you bring people together. So even if you aren't somebody who is of a different ethnicity or has a disability, you can go, yeah, but I stand with you and I support you, because actually we are one organization. We have to work together and be together. And that's true inclusion. That is where, no matter what your makeup, that whoever you sit next to or work with or work for or have working for you, it's that everybody still has respect, value, support, and come together. And that's the communication, that it doesn't matter, what your individualism is. It's about who we are together and making sure that everybody can come to the table. Because I think without that, inclusion doesn't stand for anything. This has to be about creating an environment of belonging where everybody counts. Their differences are absolutely recognized and understood and supported appropriately. But it's the strength of everybody coming together. So the comms for me are about keeping it real. Don't hide away from it. Keep it real. Be honest about it, and celebrate the difference.
I think those are such great points. The other thing from a communications point of view, from my point of view as running an agency, is really starting inside. When George Floyd happened, lots of companies went out there and were posting and the black squares and all of that. And to me, our initiative is called Act Together, because words are one thing, Instagram posts are one thing, but what are the actions that we're taking? And as a communicator and also working with our clients, it's so much about the inside first. And as you said, bringing those stories to life. And in many ways, as another client said to me, holding the C-suite really accountable. That I'm going to quote a client who said, don't try to market your way out of this. And I think that is the responsibility of the communications team, to make sure that there is that authenticity. And I would agree, bringing those stories to life. Tyrone, tell us how do you work with the communications team, and what advice do you have for the audience to make sure that this work is high impact and sticks?
Let me just say, I have the best communication team this side of the planet. They have been remarkable. The leader of our group, Kathy Kramer, has been remarkable, asking questions, seeking to understand, pushing us. She and her entire team has embraced this, and we believe at Hyatt that care versus empathy equals action. And so you're shifting the mindset from being sympathetic to being empathetic. by telling our stories, by asking questions, by being really real. I have to find myself calming them down. Okay, hold on, let's wait, let's get ahead of ourselves. But they have taken this on with a vengeance. And they have seek to understand, they have done research, they're writing scripts and talking points for our leaders, embedding diversity into the conversation, and they're not holding back at all. And so I think that it starts with care. The individuals have to care first and have to really move from sympathy to empathy. Sympathy is, I understand that you're having a hard time, but let's move on, right? I'll acknowledge it. But empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, thinking about it, understanding. We did training back earlier this year, with all of our top leaders, 1,000 leaders around the globe, talking about the leading inclusively. What does it mean to lead inclusively? And starting with creating what we call psychological safety, that safe place where people can share their stories. And when they were treated differently, regardless of race, gender, orientation, we all have been treated differently. And by the way, we all come from a place of privilege. I, as a Black man holding the role that I hold today, I am privileged than some of my other Black friends in my community. So understanding that there's diversity and dimensions of diversity is broader than race and gender, understanding all of those differences, celebrating and acknowledging those differences, but actually if we can also honor the similarities, right, we'll be able to eradicate racism.
Right, I think those are great points, and also not sacrificing all this for perfection. Starting to take those small steps, knowing that it may not be perfect, but you're out there doing that. We have a very interesting question from the audience I want to ask both of you, and that is, are there people in your organization who openly deny systemic racism exists? If so, how do you deal with that? If not, are you worried they are sitting there silently resenting all of this focus on race? What a terrific and important question. Sherry, can you give us your thoughts?
I think, unfortunately, that is the case. I don't think everybody is on board with this yet. And whether they are honest about it or not is obviously two separate things. So my view would be, you have to start at the beginning. Okay, you can't assume you are any steps down the track. So you've got to really think about, what message do you want to get across to your people? What's the awareness? What's the education? What needs to change? What are the really, really specific and probably baby steps that need to be started? Because eventually those people who don't get on board with this will be found out. And then you have to deal with that in the situation that's appropriate in that country, in the right way. But unfortunately, everybody isn't on the same train from the get-go. You do have to gather people with you, and that's why I say it's everybody's responsibility. If you've got the support at the top, you've got it coming from the bottom up, and you've got it from the middle out, eventually you do gather more people with you, but there will always be some anomalies, always, sadly.
And I think it is such a learning, because I know even in the last 6 months, I've learned so much about my colleagues and what it means. Hearing Black mothers say they're afraid when their sons get on an airplane is something I had never heard. So that learning, and I think if we bring those stories to life for people who can relate to one another on other dimensions, I think that could help advance it. Tyrone, what is your response to whether there are people in the organization denying systemic racism exists?
So I would agree that there are people that are there that are not saying it, and the silence is what concerns me the most, because not sharing that, and we don't know how we can help individuals. But I think we've created, while there's people to the right, to the left, the majority of the people are in the center, are really advocating. And to Sherry's point, they will influence others. You have your innovators, you have your early adapters, and you have your late adapters. Your early adapters will help to bring those folks along. And I have to say, it's top down, bottom up. Solve for one, benefit all. When Black Lives Matters, when George Floyd was murdered and the Black Lives Matters came out, our CEO made it very clear on the global town hall. Black life matters to us. If it doesn't matter to you, we welcome you to leave. That was a very direct message that came from the top. And let me just be very clear, when CEOs make those type of statements, either you line up or you fall out. And if you don't line up, people will hold you accountable. I have had to do more intervening with people not assuming positive intent and not learning. And some of the things is that people just don't understand. We have to help them understand, and we can't create an environment that is polarizing them against us. I'll give an example of one of our leaders said, I just don't understand why there's historically Black colleges. There are no predominantly white institutions. Now, I could have handled it 2 different ways, right? But I said, okay, let's stop and think about it. How do you describe Yale, Harvard, Cornell, right? And understand why there's historical Black colleges, because Blacks were never allowed to attend those colleges and universities, nor could they afford it. And when the 1 or 2 that went, they were treated so indifferent, right? So that we never got the resolve. It was never welcome, and there wasn't a sense of belonging. And let me be very clear, diversity without inclusion leads to confusion. If you don't figure that out, you're going to have a very difficult time of communicating that. So I think it's, and then so we are, another solution for us is that we're now gathering white men and having conversations and helping white men to understand what it means to be a full diversity partner in this case. Because you have to recognize.
We're running down on time, but you make such important points, and we didn't really get to talk too much about the role of the CEO, but I certainly know for both Paige and Hyatt, and it really goes to show the power we as business people have today, which is different from what it used to be, I think, to really make change for the long term beyond the products and services we sell. So I see Arun, he's probably going to start playing the music. Sherry, Tyrone, thank you so much. This is such an important topic. I wish they would have given us 2 or 3 hours. You both have been at this a long time, a lot for us to learn, and I hope our audience leaves today with just a little bit more inspiration as we continue on this journey. So Arun, I will send it back to you. Thank you for the honor of hosting this session.
Thank you so much, Barbie. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Tyrone. Like you said, a fantastic session. We could talk about this for hours. As it happens, several sessions during this conference are focused on this issue. Thankfully, we had a great session at the Entrepreneurs Forum. We have another excellent session at the end of the day where we have CBS News journalist Wesley Lowery, who's going to be talking about racial injustice as it pertains to the media. But it was so nice to see a discussion now on race that didn't duck the hard questions, and that was focused on actions as opposed to just words. But even when it comes to words alone, I really did like diversity without inclusion leads to confusion. So thank you very much. We are going to break now. We're going to be back. We're running a little bit over, so we're going to shorten the break to 10 minutes. We'll be back at 10:03 with a session on fighting the infodemic. We've got a great speaker from the World Health Organization. We've also got a session on communications in the techlash age. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will close with CBS News journalist Wesley Lowery. See you all shortly. Thank you.